Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Gotham Baseball Live podcast, the first episode of the 2026 season. And joining me, I am Mark Healey, and joining me is my new co-host, Peter Schwartz. How are you, Peter?
I'm doing great, Mark. It's exciting to be a part of this. Thank you for having me as part of the Gotham baseball family. And I think we're really going to have a lot of fun doing this show every week.
I think so too, and thank you for agreeing to come on board because this is something that Gotham Baseball Live's been around a long time, but uh, I can't, we've had some great Yankee co-hosts, but this is the first time somebody's, decided to come on board with your pedigree, and certainly something that I'm looking forward to. Talking Yankee baseball, Mets baseball, because that's what Gotham baseball is all about, the past, present, and future of the New York game.
Well,
So,
it's funny because a lot of people, for whatever reason, a lot of people think I'm a Mets fan. I don't know why people do that, but the funny part is my wife and my kids are Met fans.
right.
So I've actually wound up definitely in the last 20 years, but I would say even more so in my entire life. I've probably been to more Met games than Yankee games just because I grew up in Queens, so I think it was just easier to go to Met games. But like now, we wind up going to more Met games. But I don't know where there was ever the the misunderstanding of people that I was actually a Met fan. I don't I follow the Mets, but I never you'll never see a picture of me wearing a Met shirt, but that doesn't take away the
Right.
respect I have for the team.
Right.
I'm still trying to figure out why people think I'm a Met fan.
You know what it is? I think sometimes, people make the mistake if you write something positive about,
Hmm.
the team that you're writing about, right? Because I've had the same thing, because I've written, over the years. I mean, it's my 30th year in media. Over the years, I've covered the Yankees. I covered the Yankee World Series in 2009.
Sure.
It's like, oh, you're a Yankee fan. It's like, no, man, this is my job. Like, I, so I've never worn a Yankee jersey in my life. But what's funny is that, as we get into this is something we're going to do every week. We have Dave Lemon from New York Newsday is going to join us next week. Our first guest, somebody I've known for a long time. And, it's what we want to do with this show is give people the opportunity to, get a different perspective of Mets baseball, Yankees baseball, the history of the game, different things that come up. And one of those things that came up this week, and it's funny because you texted me right away when it happened, was CC Sabathia getting his number retired and a spot in Monument Park. What was your first reaction when you heard that announcement?
Well, the first reaction was that I was very happy to have this. They gave this out at a Yankee game last year when he got into the Baseball Hall of Fame. So, and it's actually sponsored by one of my other employers, WFN. But it's funny because Mark, when I first heard the news, I I had to do almost like a double take of some sort because I had to process it, remember exactly how many years he played for the Yankees, remember did he put up the numbers that would constitute being a player that you would retire? Because that's the highest honor that you can bestow upon a player in an organization. Teams have, like the Yankees have Monument Park where there's some plaques, but they haven't retired the player's number. The Islanders have a Hall of Fame, but not everybody in the Hall of Fame had their number retired. So I had to do a deep dive back into his stats. It was actually talking about it with my younger son Jared. I'm like, what do you think? He goes, he deserves to have his number retired, no question. All right, let me look at the numbers. And when you look at the numbers, it really shouts out that this was a deserving honor for him. But it's funny because it didn't hit me that way right away. But if you do the deep dive and his winning percentage and the way his numbers went up in the postseason, I think he deserves it. And I'll tell you another thing too. They brought him in 2009. The new Yankee Stadium was just opening up. They win the World Series that year. But to me, between it was that year really solidifies it, but also he was so well liked by his teammates. He was such a good guy in that clubhouse. And Mark, you'll remember there was a game, I want to say it was like 2014, maybe 2015, somewhere around there. He had a clause in his contract with a certain number of innings that he had to reach to get a bonus. And he was in the game. It was going to be his last start of the season. And a couple of Yankees got plunked in the game. I think it was against the Rays. I'm pretty
Yep.
sure it was against
Yep.
Tampa Bay.
Yes.
So a couple of Yankees get plunked in the game. Again, he's the ultimate teammate and the ultimate clubhouse guy. Well, he goes and retaliates and plunks a player on the Rays. He gets thrown out of the game. I think he winds up falling an inning short of the bonus. And I think the Yankees wound up probably giving it to him anyway, but I think that just showed what kind of a player he was and what kind of a teammate he was. And I think a lot of those teammates will all be back for him on September 26th when he gets his number retired. But I could not be happier for him. He was a great Yankee for 11 years.
Yeah, and what a pleasure to cover, as a media person. When you first of all, the Yankees just in general, when I was covering them on a regular basis, it was a pleasure. Everyone was so professional. The everybody when George Steinbrenner was the owner, everybody wore a suit. Everybody, so like you had to dress better when you went to Yankee Stadium. And people say to me, "Well, isn't that weird? Like, what do you care?" I'm like, dude, it's when a precedent is set, right? And everyone around you is dressing up, or suiting up to cover a baseball game. You're not going to wear a t-shirt, when you go to the Yankee Stadium press box. So I found him a pleasure to cover. I agree with everything you said as far as his numbers. I was like you at first, like his number retired. I get he's in the Hall of Fame and he went in as a Yankee, but the Monument Park thing, I did have to pause and say, and only because Bill Madden, the great Daily News columnist who's been around forever, he's been over the last few weeks. He's been talking about Greg Nettles being in Monument Park and how he was deserving of it. So my thought process was thinking about people who weren't in it as I was trying to come up with ways to either agree with Bill or disagree with Bill. And to me, this like to me, and I did the same thing you did. I went in, I looked at the numbers, but I looked at not just the numbers, but his overall impact, as you said, in the clubhouse, on the team, as a leader, as a guy who, went through some stuff. Let's be honest. He went through some stuff.
Right. Right.
Personally.
And I think it shows that he was human. Listen, it happens, but the fact is he was able to turn his life around, get back on the mound and finish his Hall of Fame career.
And never seemed to affect the way that whatever he was going through didn't seem to affect how he dealt with the media, didn't seem to affect how he dealt with his teammates. And so that's what I take away from, just the accolades. Here's my question, and I've been begging, Yankee fans and people around the game to, obviously when this came down, when Trent Grisham accepted the qualifying offer, right? Obviously now that they've brought back Bellinger, obviously the question is different. But when it happened, it seemed to me that it took the Yankees a little bit by surprise, which Brian Cashman kind of admitted a little bit, like, it was 50-50. Right. But a lot of people thought now Bellinger's not coming back because of the qualifying offer to Grisham. So now that, the offseason is pretty much over, we're in spring training. How did you feel when Trent Grisham, accepted the qualifying offer and is now going to be the center fielder for the New York Yankees in 2026? Is that something you think that's a good thing, or do you think that it complicates the roster and how they're going to maybe work in some of these younger players?
Well, first of all, I was not surprised that the Yankees extended the offer because obviously they never dreamed in a million years that he was going to take it. Coming off the year he had last year, you figured somebody was going to make him an offer. So I think the strategy backfired on the Yankees, so to speak. So they are now stuck with him. And the concern you have from a Yankees perspective is that now going to prohibit them from moving on and going out and bringing Bellinger back and making some other moves. And to the Yankees' credit, they got the checkbook out and they brought Cody back. So I think the fact that they got Cody back kind of alleviates the disappointment of or the shock of Grisham coming back. Because look, he had a great year for the Yankees last year. I think it would be almost ludicrous to think he's going to do it again. But at the very, very minimum, they have a veteran guy like him back on a 1-year deal. And if he gives you half of what he gave you last year, it's going to help the Yankees, whether he's in the starting lineup or he comes off the bench. He has a little, pop in that bat. But as long as they brought Bellinger back, I think the Yankees could have avoided, or certainly have avoided, disaster. Because if they didn't get Bellinger back because of getting Grisham, then it would have been a complete disaster. But I think all things considered, it worked out pretty well. Now, the second part of that is that now what does Grisham's spot on the roster do for Jason Dominguez and Spencer Jones? Obviously, it appears like Jason Dominguez is headed for a AAA assignment at the beginning of the year. We're now in spring training. We've seen Spencer Jones launch two monster home runs.
Absolutely.
And I mean, some people have suggested over the last couple of days, well, he's pushing for a roster spot. He's pushing for a roster spot that's probably not there. Because if they're going to send Dominguez down, who's got some major league experience, I don't see a pathway for Spencer Jones to be on the opening day roster. So it's a nice problem to have when you have too many. But I would have liked to have seen Jason Dominguez get a shot on the opening day roster, because I think when he's been healthy and he's been in the lineup, again, his defense is another thing, but to have that bat from both sides of the plate, to me, would be something that I think would benefit the Yankees. But it certainly sounds like he's going to start the season in the minor leagues.
Yeah, and like with the Mets last year, with the roster glut of all those infielders and trying to find spots for young guys to play. Sometimes it is a good problem to have, but sometimes it's also a bad problem, because young guys got to play. So yeah, they're better off at AAA, starting the year at AAA and trying to figure that out, that roster. But the Mets never figured it out last year. It was this situation where and then guys would get hurt and then they'd have to scramble. And so one thing I would like to see, because that's the one thing I'm concerned about with the Yankees, is their bench. Their bench doesn't scream.
No.
If somebody gets hurt, next man up. That's one of the questions I have about the Yankees' strength this year. I mean, look, they're good. They're a good team. They're always a good team. They're running it back, as it were. You're expecting, you're ready. You're expecting to get, guys back. Rodon is, Rodon, Garrett Cole. Those guys are not going to start the season on the active roster. So you get those guys. That's going to help. So like for me, like I look at that bench and I'm like, wow, that's concerning, right? Ahmed Rosario.
That's why they signed Randall Grichuk yesterday to a minor league deal. They figure maybe they can catch some lightning in a bottle. Maybe he gets a roster spot. Maybe he helps fortify that bench. I actually think that was a pretty good signing by the Yankees.
Yeah, and he kills the Yankees, so maybe maybe he returns the favor to other teams.
Yeah.
One of the other things I was thinking about is that the Yankee bullpen obviously is going to play a major role, especially with the injuries to the. I don't want to say injuries yet, because these are guys that they didn't get hurt in spring training. Obviously, they're coming back from injuries. But that bullpen is going to be huge, especially in April and May for the Yankees. And how do you feel about where the Yankee bullpen is at right now?
I think it's incomplete. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. I mean, the back end, they're going to be okay with Bednar, closing it down. But I think the rest of it, and I think there's going to be that domino effect once all the guys start coming back, because players that may start the season in the rotation will be moved into a bullpen role, or maybe they'll be sent back down to AAA. But it's clearly incomplete right now. I don't think there's any way you can um, definitively say, "Oh, this is going to be a good bullpen. This is going to be a bad bullpen. It's going to be a mediocre bullpen." You know, Will Warren is a big X factor in this. Does he start? He'll probably start the season maybe in a starting position if depending on how things work out. But once one starter comes back, he could then become a valuable part of the middle of that bullpen. Clark Schmidt is another guy. I love him as a starter, but when he comes back, there may not be a spot for him, and he could turn into a valuable guy in the bullpen. So I think it's when you're starting the season in late March and you got the injuries and you've got still a whole bunch of spring training left to go to see how things work out. I just think it's incomplete, and I don't think it's a situation right now where you can definitively say what that bullpen's going to look like, because you have to also remember too, Brian Cashman works his magic, during the season at the trading deadline. If he has to bring in another arm like he did last year, some of the moves worked out, some of them didn't. Jake Bird hopefully will bounce back for them this year in one of those roles. So I just think it's incomplete right now. It's way too early to give a definitive role on what that bullpen. You got your lockdown guy in Bednar at the end of the bullpen, and that's probably about it. That's the only definitive thing you can say until everybody comes back, and then you can sort out how the bullpen's going to look.
Which is, I think, a challenge for every team.
Yeah,
Especially with it's an early spring training because of the WBC. Teams have players in the WBC, and that ramping up early is always a concern. Whether you like the WBC or not like the WBC, it's a reality that every team has to deal with. So that certainly, to me, is always a concern. When guys are ramping it up way earlier than I mean, there were reports all week about guys throwing 97, 98, 99 in the first week of spring training games, which to me is insane. But
right.
that's max velocity now is what everybody preaches. And I mean, look, I'm old school. I'm all about spring training means nothing except preparation and health. That to me is what spring training is. And then you have, maybe you have one or two roster spots that are up for grabs. So, maybe a guy has a hot spring and wins a job. But that doesn't mean that guy, whoever it is,
Right.
is going to have a good season. It's like, like late September call-ups when your team is out of it and they have a great
Right.
September. It's kind of the same thing, right?
Well, yeah, because Joe Torre is at Yankee spring training now as a special guest instructor. He was invited by Aaron Boone, and I caught the interview he did yesterday with Yes Network, and he loved spring training. It was his favorite time of the year because there was no pressure to win. Now, when George was alive, it might have been a little bit different, but Joe always felt so at ease with spring training because when you look at that Yankee team that he had every year, basically he said 23 or 24 spots. You knew who those were going to be when spring training started. So you're looking for the last player or two to round out that roster. And I think a big part of any construction of a roster is we're going to circle back to the bullpen. It's for any team. Who's that 24th and 25th guy going to be? You're going to bring an extra arm north in April when it's cold and maybe pitchers don't have the length, or are you going to bring an extra player, off the bench, in case, some games go into extra innings at the beginning of the year and you're going to want that extra bat off the bench. It's an interesting way of looking at it. But I think that's how these bullpens are going to fluctuate from game to game because you just don't know how things are going to shake out.
Before we switch gears to the Mets, I don't do predictions, especially with the number of victories and all that. I hate math. So I'm not going to sit here and try to figure out victories. How many wins?
Yeah.
Do the Yankees
It's not
win?
like Mark. It's not like when Mike and the Mad Dog when they would do
Oh,
the NFL schedule and they do win, loss,
yeah.
win.
No,
So if
it's
you want to get the Yankee and Mets schedules out, we can go through
no, no,
162.
no, no. But the question is, where do you think now? I feel that the off season for the AL East has been very weird. You know,
Yeah.
obviously some teams made some big moves, some teams made some little moves. I don't know what the Red Sox are doing. The Orioles, obviously, add Pete Alonso. I don't know if that's going to, change much for them. Obviously, the Blue Jays made some moves. Where do you think, last year means whatever, as far as a
Right.
reference point, but based on the offseason, where do you think the Yankees are going to be in this AL East coming up?
Oh, look, it's in baseball in 2026. It starts and ends with making the playoffs. And for the Yankees, that's kind of where it starts and ends. They are a playoff team. They're going to win again. Like I know how you feel about giving the numbers, but this is a Yankee team that when you look at it on paper, and obviously it's not, it's an imperfect way of looking at it, but you look at this Yankee team, and this Yankee team can probably win, between 93 and 100 games, depending on how it shakes out. What do they do trade wise during the season? Injuries are going to be a huge factor. So it starts and ends with making the playoffs. And I look at the Yankees as a team that's going to be in the playoffs. No question about it. Now
Yeah.
the next point is it can they edge out Toronto and also Baltimore and Boston as well? But are they have they gotten better than Toronto? And I think the answer to that is I don't know. I don't. They basically were even, split the division with them. They lost out on the tiebreaker. Um, but I look at the Yankees. I'm like they will be a playoff team and they will contend for the AL East title. I think if we're sitting here again in September, middle of September, if the Yankees are not in first place, they'll be in shouting distance of it, and it'll be a pennant race down the stretch. That's how I think you have to look at it. But again, it starts and ends with being in the tournament and being in the postseason. And I think when all is said and done, we'll be talking about October baseball in the Bronx. Just the question is it going to be a wild card or will it be a division champion? I think the jury is still out as to whether or not the team will win the division.
So, one of the things that I've noticed this spring training with just the Mets community in general. Uh, Unfortunately, people think that X. I don't call it X. I call it Twitter. That
I
Mets
still
Twitter.
call it Twitter also.
Yeah, me too. So Mets Twitter is really split as far as like continuing to bemoan the loss of Alonso and Nimmo and not so much McNeil, but obviously Edwin Diaz, and basically saying that they forgot about the fans and this was a terrible way to go about the offseason, and then the other half is like, oh, these new guys, the core never won and this and that. And like, I think both sides of that argument um, make sense, right? I can respect where both people are
Mm-hmm.
coming from. Uh, but that's not like the majority of the people, including my son Jack, who will be doing podcasts with Jack on the Gotham Sports Machine over the course of the season. Jack is still bent out of shape, about Pete and Edwin Diaz, and he is as knowledgeable. You've spoken to him. He's as knowledgeable a fan as anybody,
Mm-hmm.
and so our conversations are and a lot of my family and a lot of my friends are Met fans, so a lot of them are still miserable. Now, look, I just, I mean, again, at full honesty, I am still, not happy seeing Brandon Nimmo in a Rangers jersey. I mean, he was my
Right.
favorite player. I didn't make any bones about it when he was traded. I hated the trade, but I haven't brought up his name since. And to me, it's about this group and what can this group accomplish. So for me, just to to run it back where I asked you about the Yankees, as far as the AL East is concerned, I think the NL East is a very winnable division.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Philly did nearly as much this offseason as I thought they were going to. Obviously, they brought back Schwarber, so that's huge for them. I think the Braves are going to be better. They're going to be healthier. But I don't think that they've made any moves where I'm like, really worried about them being dominant Obviously all the offseason talking about how you're going to beat the Dodgers, how you're going to beat the Dodgers. Well, first you got to make the playoffs, which you didn't do last year. And secondly, um, this group has to prove that they can win. It's a new group, obviously. Lindor, when he comes back, obviously he is the leader of the team as far as, him and Juan Soto are these, dominant forces. It's really how
Right.
all these other guys are going to fit. So from the outside looking in, Pete, where do you see this Mets team? Do you think that they can win the NL East?
Yeah, I do. I think this potentially is going to be a better Mets team than last year. They only finished one game out of the playoffs last year, and I understand the whole um, backfire from the Met fans about because you're losing some popular players, and I get it. I dealt with it in this house every time the Mets were losing a player. You believe that the Alonso's not coming back, and Nimmo's gone, and McNeil is gone now too. I get it because when you have players who are part of a group for a while, you get used to that group. Now, here's the problem with that also, because this is kind of how I look at it. If you're David Stearns and you were brought in to reshape the Mets and bring a World Series to Flushing, um, sometimes you can't get caught up in, oh, this guy has been a Met for this number of years. This guy, look what happened to the Islanders after the back-to-back runs to the Final Four. And there's not a bigger Islander fan on the planet than myself. And you love those guys, all those players, right? So they go to the Final Four in the NHL back-to-back years. And then that group keeps getting older and getting older. And it looks like that window is closing. And it kind of did the first year UBS Arena. They don't make the playoffs. Um, and now you're seeing with a new GM, you're starting to see a little bit more progress because they've changed up the group a little bit. I think that's what David Stearns wanted to do with the Mets from day one. And I think the problem was Pete Alonso's home run against the Brewers. Because, obviously it was tough to see Pete Alonso leave after last season. But, if Pete Alonso doesn't hit that home run off Devin Williams in the playoffs against the Brewers, um, the Mets probably don't bring Pete Alonso back last year. And maybe that expedites the dismantling of the team. So David Stearns dealt with it one more year because he looked at like, how do I dismantle a team that went to the NLCS? Now this is going to be his team and his fingerprints are all over it. So from that perspective, I think he's probably doing the right thing. Now, if there was one player you wanted to bring back, I would say it was probably Alonso because I think he was the fan favorite. You saw a lot of 20 jerseys all around, Citi Field when you went to the games. So I think that's one that probably hurts the most. But I think if you the kids like to say, let it cook. I think you got to say, let David Stearns cook and see how this group works out and let him put his stamp on this team and how he wants the blueprint to look like. But I do like what the Mets did in the offseason. I think, they made some really good moves on the field, in the clubhouse. And I think they're a much better team this year. And I think they'll contend for the division.
I think the biggest takeaway for me last year, and I said this, I've written this, was the pitching was terrible. It was terrible. It was poorly conceived. Signing Frankie Montas was a disaster.
I could have told you that. I had
Yeah, I
experience with
know.
that.
I know. I know. I mean, I remember when they signed him, I'm like, what? Didn't we see this already with the Yankees? So, and then Manaea gets hurt in the spring. Montas gets hurt in the spring. Manaea was basically useless last year. He was hurt. And then when he was healthy, he couldn't pitch. But I think obviously I think the pitching staff is better with Peralta and knowing Freddie Peralta and having McLean for the whole season. Hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers with the WBC guys throwing 97 yesterday, driving me insane.
He
Um,
is he's you know what, Mark? I don't mean to cut you off, but I am so impressed with McLean.
oh, he's awesome.
And I one of the Met games we went to last year as a family, we were at one of his starts against I think it was against the Phillies. It was that Friday. I think it was a Friday night game. He had that amazing start where he just
Yes.
completely shut them down. Yeah. And he's the type of guy that I think, if you remember, and I know you do, you go back to Doc Gooden and the walk up to go see Doc Gooden when he was first coming up was incredible, and you
Yep.
had to be at Shea Stadium
Yes.
because it became an
Absolutely.
event. And I think it's going to be the same thing with Nolan McLean this year. I think when he's on the mound, if there's tickets available for the game, uh, you're going to see, and weather is good, whatever. It's not going to be too cold. It's not going to be too hot. You're going to see that walk up when he's pitching. You're going to see that same atmosphere, I think, at Citi Field when he's on the mound is when the Met fans were excited about Gooden. And also, Matt, let's in between that, Matt Harvey too. Like I think that he's got that type of charisma and that type of ability that if it's a random day and there's tickets available and he's pitching, people are going to go. I think he's got that kind of excitement.
I think so too. And my God, we could do this all day, obviously, but we're running out of time.
Yeah.
And we have so much to get to still, which we'll certainly get to next week with Dave Lennon from New York Newsday, who will be joining us. But just to close it out, Peter, I think this podcast is going to be successful. I think having you on board makes it even more special. And we're going to do this every Friday during the season. And if special things pop up, maybe we'll do some one-offs or something like that. But what we want people to do is to send us questions. We want people to subscribe to the to the YouTube page. Just go to GothamBaseball.com. On the right side, you can see follow Gotham Baseball, our Twitter, our Facebook, our Instagram, and the YouTube icon is there. Just go to our YouTube page, subscribe for free, because we're going to have some special giveaways during the course of the season. I want to do like when we get to 100 subscribers or 200 subscribers or something like that. So I'm really looking forward to spending the 2026 season in New York baseball with you, Peter.
I am really excited. And I'm looking forward to it with you as well. And I can't believe we've done this now for a half an hour, and you did not mention the jersey and the hat that I was wearing here.
I know. I meant to. Well, because what people, again, I could talk about that for hours. You're wearing the New York Knights jersey, the New York Knights cap, those colors, that movie, that look was one of the inspirations for Gotham baseball.
So, funny, really quick, and I know we're running out of time. This may be why people think I'm a Mets fan, because when we do go to Met games as a family, I have to be incognito. I would never disrespect the Mets by wearing Yankee stuff to a Met game that didn't involve the Yankees. So I feel like when I go to the Met games, I have to try and fit in. So there have been games where I have worn this jersey to the Met games because it's orange and blue. Sometimes the hat, sometimes an Islanders hat because it's orange and blue. And the four of us years ago, we took a picture with Mr. Met outside of Kiddie Field when the kids were young enough to go on Kiddie Field. And so there's me in this jersey with my Islanders hat on. I'm sorry, not an Islanders hat. It was the 2013 American League All-Star hat, which was at Citi Field.
Right.
So people saw the picture on social media and they're like, "Oh, you came over, you're like a Mets fan now?" I'm like, "No, it's not a Mets. I'm not a Mets fan. You're wearing a Mets hat in that picture and you're wearing an orange and blue jersey." I'm like, no, it's the jersey from the Natural. And it was the American League All-Star hat from 2013. So, but I wanted to wear this today. It's my favorite movie, The Natural. I love it. My wife got me this jersey years ago as a gift. My kids got me the hat, and it's my favorite movie. And I sit there and watch it every time it's on, like I've never seen it before.
Well, I'm the same way, and again, like I said, it was one of the inspirations for Gotham baseball. So I love seeing it. I love looking at it, and I'm really.
And I went to games. I went to games in that stadium when I was in college in Buffalo at Buffalo State. Bisons, the AAA Bisons. My when I first started in '85 at Buffalo State, they were wrapping up at War Memorial Stadium, so I went to games there. And then I was an intern for the Bisons, and I was an intern when they opened up the new stadium in downtown Buffalo. So it might be another reason why I'm so attracted to that movie, was because I got to see games in that stadium where it was filmed. So very special movie, and I wanted to make sure I did something a little special on the first show today. We'll
Absolutely.
see. Maybe a Long Island Ducks jersey next week.
Okay, sounds good. But maybe I'll wear my Gotham baseball jersey.
There you go.
All right, Peter, thanks so much for joining and joining the crew, and we look forward to the 2026 baseball season. And all you fans out there, go to the YouTube page for Gotham Baseball, subscribe, and we'll see you next week with our special guest, Dave Lennon.